Well, hello everyone. I'm back for another update here. I am back home from my long 4+ month bike tour of the country. Will I do another trip? Well, depends on finances. My bank account is almost completely depleted from this trip, especially as much as it cost me to get home. So, hard to say if I'll be back out again on another trip or not anytime soon, unless I take on another part-time job. If anybody wants to follow my trip more closely, I journaled it on Crazy Guy on a Bike under East to West Bike Tour of US. It may already be buried under first page or two. But the trip will consist of going east to west and then north to south. So if you want more information on my trip, I created a daily blog on, again, Crazy Guy on a Bike website. My journal of the trip, day by day, is on that website if you want to read more about it. But this channel focuses more on climate. I base my information on a lifetime of study, weather and climate. Even though I never officially became a meteorologist, I did go to school for 1 year, but never completed it. But I have continued my studies. So I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to climate, when it comes to meteorology. I've been alive long enough to know what a global warming weather pattern truly looks like, what the weather patterns do under a global cooling regime. I've done a lot of research on it from information written before the agenda of global warming came out, and so what I'm going to share is based on a lifetime of research and the truth, which is my biggest focus, is to put the truth out there, is what really is going on with our weather and climate and where it's likely going to go next in the near term and in the long term. First of all, I've been talking about this hurricane season being a no-show. It's on track for that. The trend continues. Yeah, they named Gabriel out in the Atlantic, but as far as I'm concerned, there's not a storm there. It's a manufactured group of thunderstorms that satellite technology is keeping going. And if you look closely at the images, you could see that there's definitely some sort of energy plume of some sort being shot into the center of the cloud mass to keep it going. On its own, it would be gone in about 12 hours. If you look closely, you could see it fade and then another explosion. It's definitely being intelligently manipulated as far as trying to keep it going, hoping it will catch on. And I've been raising the concern that we may have crossed the threshold where, especially in the Atlantic Basin, they may not even be able to create a storm of technology anymore. It may be so far gone that even technology won't work anymore to create systems, and they will disappear from the Atlantic. And of course, people in Florida would be happy about that, or the Gulf Coast, if that did play out. But we know that last year was a hair's breadth from being a no-show, other than the beginning of the season. We got Helene, which was, I think, September 26th. Today is the 21st, so the quietness is lasting even longer than it did last year. And I don't count Gabriel. Gabriel is just a bunch of showers and thunderstorms that wouldn't be there if it weren't for technology. And maybe they'll get lucky and it will catch on if it hits a warm patch of water somewhere, but it's highly unlikely, based on my experience of observation, that it's going to amount to anything. And even if it does, it will move out and harmlessly into the Atlantic. Yeah, they keep trying to say it's going to get active, because that's what happened last year. It did get active for a week or two. That was solar induced. We don't have that extra solar activity this year. So it's highly unlikely to see anything's going to change in the Atlantic. We had a few in the Pacific which were manufactured, because I think the Pacific side still has not crossed the threshold yet completely to where they're not going to get any more storms. But the Atlantic, they've done so much manipulating there in the last decade that I feel that most of the heat is gone from the Atlantic. They're not going to be able, there's not going to be many more storms for years to come. Unless the sun does something unexpected. But the sun right now is past the max, it's heading toward a minimum. And that's what I'm going to get into next. With the sun going into a minimum, the heat energy is not going to be replenished in these oceans, which is why I'm making a long-term prediction of reduced tropical system activity. That is why the eastern U.S. has been so dry, because most of the precipitation in late summer, early fall in the eastern U.S. comes from moisture associated with tropical weather systems when they cross the Atlantic. Remnants of hurricanes, tropical storms, tropical waves all contribute moisture that normally, at least in the benign climate that we enjoyed in times past, would stream northward and give frequent shower thunderstorm activity to the eastern U.S. in late summer, early fall. But the last several years have been dry every fall. Why? Because we're not getting those tropical systems anymore. Or they're been manufactured. There have not been natural systems forming anymore. But again, I am concerned that the Atlantic side of things, we are very close to that threshold. If not over it, we're close to where these storms are going to be gone for a long time, perhaps. We are not going to see, meaning that every year in the eastern U.S., we are going to have a drought in late summer, because without these systems, the rainfall will not come anymore. We will have a dry period every year, running from about early August till October, or even November, because during that time frame, most of the precipitation comes from tropical weather systems, or historically has. So, if you don't like the drought in the eastern U.S., get used to it, because this is going to become a yearly thing. Of course, they're going to blame it on global warming. If they're not already doing so, they will. But since I've been back home for over a week, it has only rained once from that weather system formed offshore last week. Threw some showers back over this way. And what this means too is progressively colder winters, because we are going into a solar minimum, and the effects of the Tonga water vapor are gradually wearing off. There's still a lot of water vapor up there, but nowhere near what it was a few years ago. And with Arctic sea ice not melting back as much this year, there will likely be an earlier freeze up, meaning winter may arrive a little earlier than we're used to seeing. Maybe December this year might bring a little bit more in the way of cold weather than we've seen lately, and continue the trend that started last year. But again, as far as the hurricane season this year, it's highly likely it's going to be a no-show season, and the trends are going to continue, because I feel we are very close to that threshold I've been talking about in the Atlantic, where they won't even be able to manufacture a storm anymore because there'll be so much heat lacking. And you can see evidence of that. They try to use technology even before the systems clear Africa. And then as soon as they hit that water, come off the coast, they die because the water is not warm enough. Of course, they're trying to make the excuse that they come off too far north. The only reason that's happening is because they're manufacturing the convection to come off further north. And there are systems in the past that have come off the same latitude and turned into hurricanes, so they can't use that excuse. For example, I saw a post about Hurricane Hugo in 1989. They came off the coast of Africa at the same latitude as a lot of these waves that they're manufacturing have come off lately. But that one developed into a Category 4 hurricane. So that's not an excuse that they're coming off of. Because they want to make it appear that the intertropical convergence zone is further north than normal to prove the global warming hypothesis. That's bunk, because in general, right now, the convergence zone is almost down to the coast of Africa there by Ghana. It's already shifted south, and they're bombing the northern edge of it with energy to make it appear that the intertropical convergence zone is further north. It really isn't. Subtropical high has been very weak, as I've stated in previous videos. It's with it that weak, the hurricanes cannot make it across, or anything that does develop can't make it across the Atlantic. It curves north too soon and gets pulled up into troughs out in the Atlantic. And this protects the U.S. coastline and even the Gulf from a major hit, even if something got going. As I said, in recent years, most of the hits have been storms that formed in the Bay of Campeche or Western Caribbean, or because the high has been positioned further south. So anything that develops in those areas, instead of heading into Mexico or Galveston, heads up toward the Gulf Coast or the west coast of Florida. This is why they've gotten hit, because a lot of these manufactured storms have moved up that way. But it's getting to the point now the Gulf is clear as a bell. Of course, now they're trying to say the Gulf water temperatures are record warm. I'm not buying that. If the Gulf temperatures are so warm, where is all the moisture? Where are all the hurricanes? Why is the East in a drought? If the water in the Gulf is so warm, there'd be a lot more evaporation, a lot more moisture in the air, a lot more precipitation in the East. As a result, it wouldn't be bone dry like this if the Gulf were really that warm, breaking records. And I also see the North Pacific. The whole North Pacific is burning up according to the anomaly charts. Other than the equator, where they're talking about a La Nina, which is below average. they have the rest of the Pacific and the Northern Hemisphere burning up literally. And I don't agree with that either. There's been so many cold fronts, so many troughs that have formed over that area of the ocean, so much storminess that I cannot see how the water temperatures throughout that region could be that warm or that much above normal. And I was in Oregon earlier this year, or this summer, and the fog wasn't too prevalent. The nights got chilly. I often had to have another layer on to stay warm. If the Pacific was that soupy warm, Oregon would not be that chilly in the middle of the summer along the coast. There would be a lot more moisture in the atmosphere, moisture content, a lot more fog. There were days where there were almost no fog there, and the nights got down to the 50, even the upper 40s. I also saw a post that NASA predicts that the sun is going to get more active again. We have reached the bottom, and the sun is on a long-term increase in activity. Well, I don't know what they base that forecast on, because cycle 25 in reality was only very slightly more active than 24 was, which is the weakest in over a century. And it doesn't come close to the previous 3 cycles. They of course, I feel that they adjusted the data because they don't want people to realize that variations in the sun create climate change. They don't want people to draw that conclusion. So they went as far as to adjust the data to fudge sunspot numbers, make them appear higher than they really are, to drop the cosmic ray count down below what it actually is on their, to where it's comparable to cycle 23. I know this cycle is nowhere near as active as 23 was. 23 had an X45 flare. The strongest flare in this cycle, I think, was what, an X6, X7, which was not even as strong as the strongest in 24. And yeah, the sun did get a little more active last year than 24 was, but all in all, right now, the sun is not really doing much more than it did in 24. It has not been since last year. Yeah, the sunspot numbers are higher, but I feel again that they are fudging a lot of the numbers on that. There are many days when I saw the sun almost blank and I look at the count and it's still over 100 or 80 or 70. And yeah, there are a few spots still lingering on the disk now, but the latest count was 150 sunspots. Yeah, they are definitely padding that number to make the cycle look more than it is, more active. And of course, then NASA comes out and says, well, we've reached the bottom of solar activity. We're going to have higher levels in 26 on. The decline has ended. And they base it on a slight bump up from 24 to 25. That's not intelligent predicting at all. A slight bump up may mean nothing. 26 could go through the bottom. We don't know for sure, but it's not intelligent predicting. If we are coming off a 70-year period of high activity, as I've stated in previous videos, we are due for an extended period of lower activity on the sun. We are overdue for it. If we've had 70 straight years of elevated activity, which for the most part has contributed to a lot of the warming we've seen in the 20th century and beginning of the 21st, as I've stated in my previous videos, we are actually due, according to Rolf Wetzel, German solar scientist, we are overdue for perhaps a prolonged period of solar shutdown where we're going to see activity levels that we haven't seen in recent history go through the floor on the sun. To me, that's a lot more intelligent of a prediction. It's based on actual evidence and not wishful thinking. That forecast of NASA's wishful thinking, because they know deep down the sun is affecting our climate. They don't want people to realize that. They're hiding the decline in solar activity, they're hiding the decline in global temperatures, which the lack of hurricanes is a symptom that global temperatures have declined in recent years. The fact that we're going into the end of September with no hurricanes, only one hurricane this year, which was manufactured in the Atlantic. If it wasn't for satellites, we'd be coming in with nothing right now. The storms just aren't developing because the planet is cooling. There is no longer enough excess heat for these storms to naturally form. I feel that pretty good possibility we're beyond the threshold of where a storm can naturally form. Like, if the satellites all disappeared tomorrow, we could go a decade without another tropical system in the Atlantic especially. So that is going to be it for this video. I'll be back again soon.